Good day, everybody. I'm Glenn Rolfing. I'm a history faculty and director of undergraduate research. And I'm here today with Matthew Valdez. Matthew, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Thanks, Glenn. My name is Matthew Valdez. I am the online education librarian, one of the reference and instruction librarians, and I oversee the archives for Pikes Peak Community College.
So just to let you all know, we're two research geeks, and basically what we want to do is we want to just launch a series of short videos and podcasts to kind of give you all a sensibility about how to approach your studies and your research here at Pikes Peak Community College. And one of the very first things that Matthew and I want to discuss is we want to discuss this idea of what it means to have a scholarly mindset. Matthew, why don't you start us off with that one?
Sure. So a lot of what we discuss in the library is under the rubric of information literacy or media literacy, and it's about developing habits of mind and critical thinking skills to be able to assess the quality of an argument or a source. And so scholarly conversations, we have to remember that they are ongoing conversations, that they usually aren't settling an issue with a definitive answer, but rather they're an iterative process where every time new information is learned, the whole conversation advances. And so anytime you dive into a topic, you're looking at a snapshot of where that conversation was at the moment that source was written. And so it's an accumulation of everything up to that point, but you have to realize that the conversation continued after that source was written, and you're just sampling a moment in time.
You're a part of that dialogue, right? And so oftentimes, when students are walking into the Learning Commons or the library, or they're searching the databases, they might even find some of the material to be dry. And it's really, sometimes it's hard to engage. I know I felt that oftentimes researching as a student. And one of the things that we do with the undergraduate research process is we want to empower you all as students to developing that habit of mind that's going to help you persist and have that sense of grit, right, as you are researching the topics you are interested in. Because ultimately, we want you to be successful in all of your classes. So before you, what you see is you see the undergraduate research process page, and you will see that Matthew and I have discussed this, that this is really not an ordinal, this is what you do first, this is what you do second, that many of these steps are fluid and you can move back and forth, right, between these particular steps. This is just more for organization and generally the approach that researchers take. And so one of the things that I like to put up here is this idea of, what does it mean to have a scholarly mindset? And, as we are in the Learning Commons and we are doing exactly taking part of that scholarly discourse that Matthew had just so eloquently described, that oftentimes we ourselves become distracted, right? And so one of the things that I always like to just share with students in regards to a scholarly mindset is making sure that you are really present with your studies. I don't know about you, Matthew, right? But I'm on Facebook and Instagram. Matter of fact, my kids even laugh at me because I have a TikTok account. But the bottom line is that those things are time sucks, right? And if you have your notifications on in your phone, then basically what's going to happen is, just like, by the way, that notification for that Microsoft Office, right, email just came through, almost timely, right? That is going to distract you from reading your sources, right? Thinking deeply about what it is that you are researching in your courses. So one of the things that you really want to do is you want to eliminate distractions.
Right. And as most scholarly topics are going to be investigated by looking at a variety of perspectives, if you're not consciously aware and sort of engaging with the material consciously, you might start blending sources together. And if you're trying to evaluate credible sources from non-credible sources, or kind of track the timeline of the evolution of our understanding of a certain topic, you're going to want to keep distinct in your mind where that information came from. And so if you're constantly distracted, if you have 5 articles up and you're distracted as you're reading all 5, at the end they might blend together and you'll have to go back and reread them. So if you keep sort of a mentality of evaluation and investigation as you're reading, it will help you in the long run to not have to return and essentially reread articles to remember which one provided what piece of information.
No, that's a great point. I mean, I oftentimes, by the way, have students tell me that, hey, Glenn, I just can't remember what I'm reading, and their phones are going off or whatnot. And what happens is that when you pick up on that distraction and you take care of business, right? Whatever it be, maybe a friend sends you a text, or you got a notification on Instagram, or there's a really funny TikTok video that your friend sent you. You really take your mind out of what you are doing to focus on this thing. And then when you come back to your research, it's like you have to reorient or recontextualize yourself to what you are studying. And believe it or not, that for some people it's sometimes it takes a little shorter time to get reoriented. Sometimes it's a little bit longer, right? But it's a time suck. And if you had notification after notification going off, you literally can lose not just minutes, but hours, right, doing your research. And something that Matthew talked about in here is that you will notice on the Scholarly Environment page that we also have Scholarly Engagement, and that we have resources. Understand, folks, that these web pages are always a organic, right, constant evolving piece of work that we are putting together. And there's some things that are up here that I know that we want to update. But literally, go to the Learning Commons, and as you are reading books or searching for articles and reading and distilling those articles, go with some note-taking material, okay? And I love brain science, and it's one of these things where I'm really consciously reading about what are the best ways in which students learn. Let's face it, generationally speaking, we are in smack dab in a middle of a fast-paced, constantly evolving digital age. And oftentimes I do see students using computers or programs or taking pictures, right? To help them create a body of notes. And I'm like improv. That's a yes and for me. But the brain science is clear. If you actually take a pen and you annotate what you are reading, that is, if I find an online article in a database, maybe Matthew has helped me to get it, I print it out, because we, by the way, at Pikes Peak Community College, all students have $25 of credit. And is that per course, if I remember correctly, or is that just per semester? Okay, good correction there. Per semester. $25 per semester to print out your materials at the Learning Commons or in the computer lab. And what is great is that you could take a pen and you literally can start annotating your text, okay? Or you have a legal pad or a notebook, and you are writing your own thoughts down, as well as writing and paraphrasing, right, the central ideas that you are reading about in your research. Brain studies have shown that students who do this practice, right, they are more than likely to remember what they are reading than students oftentimes taking note in a computer. Because what happens usually when we take notes in a computer, we tend to look at the material and just start typing what we see, right? Ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. And what ends up happening is you might start to, after you do that a few times in typing class like I did way back in the day, you will memorize that, but it can cause all kinds of problems. Problems like, oh, I did not incorporate this passage in my notes appropriately, and I was copying the text, and therefore, as I'm writing my research paper, I forget that, that instance where I recorded that note, and I commit plagiarism, right? So, using OneNote in your Microsoft Office 365 is perfectly okay. But if you are typing it, make sure you are distilling the information and you're rephrasing it in your own thoughts, right?
Yeah. Every time you add a new layer of engagement with the material, you're increasing the likelihood that it's going to form a memory. So,
Yeah.
reading it is one layer. Reading it and then transcribing in your own words a handwritten note is another layer. Reading that note that you just wrote aloud as you're writing it is a third layer. And that's a way of basically sort of
Creating memory.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know, and that's beautifully said, because ultimately, we all know, right? Research takes time, right? Completing your assignments in your classes take time. And one of the things that we really want to just impart is that, good study habits, a scholarly mindset, scholarly engagement, like this really can help save time in the long run. It may not look like it in the short run, because you feel like, oh, I'm taking all these notes and I'm reciting these notes, I'm reviewing these notes, right? I'm starting to formulate ideas for a paper. But what you're going to find is that that's going to pay dividends. That's going to just be a benefit to you at the end of the semester when you have to write a research paper or an essay or anything like that. And there's another one of my notifications. I'll have to turn that off. Okay. And so just be mindful that you can come here and you can get some great, resources. I'm working with Matthew to update this. There is a great tool, by the way, and just so that you know, the Learning Commons, right, has their own website, and I just want to share this with you real quick, and we'll probably share it with you in other videos too. But what we want to do is show you here that if you go to ppcc.edu and academics and you go to library, right, you can come here and you have access to just a wealth of information and also tools like Noodle Tools. And Noodle Tools is another note-taking system that really will help you create your bibliography, take notes on what you are reading, and really start to help to organize your projects, right, in your classes. And Matthew, how do I get to Noodle Tools?
Well, the easiest way to get to any one of our individual subscription services is to click on that databases link there that looks like a stack of pancakes and just jump into the alphabetical section that will contain the link you're looking for. So
and there we go. And so I want Noodle Tools, and so I'm going to select N, and here's Noodle Tools here. Okay. And Matthew, do you want to just talk a few minutes about this real quick?
Sure. So Noodle Tools is a cloud-based citation managing software. It's also a project managing software. What it allows you to do is create projects on the Noodle Tools website, and you can create a project for every research paper that you're working on, and then as you find sources, you add them into that project on the web client. They get saved on the Noodle Tools cloud site, and when you've finished compiling all of your resources for a given project, you can tell Noodle Tools to export that list of sources as a works cited page. Every project you create allows you to designate a style guide to accompany it. So for a history student, you would select the Chicago Manual of Style, and then all of your sources would be formatted by Noodle Tools into the Chicago format.
Yeah.
And then there are other features within the software that allows you to take notes and categorize those notes, apply tags to them, and sort of create an outline and a project workflow plan. So you can use it just to help with the citations, which is the main reason that we advertise it to students, but it has a lot of other features within it. And if you create your Noodle Tools account using that link that Glenn just showed you, you'll have access to the full pro version of Noodle Tools, which has all the paid subscription bells and whistles included.
Excuse me. All right. So do we want to take a look at it real quick?
We can.
Okay.
Sure.
So I will have you sign into yours because I'll be frank with you. I think I just created my Noodle Tools account with you a few weeks ago, and I don't think I remember my password. Now I like Matthew's system, by the way, of passwords as he's typing this in. He's got a whole bunch of basically Post-it notes in his pocket. That's the analog system there. I guess there's an app for that, Matthew, but we'll look past it this time here. Okay. And Noodle Tools here, let me go ahead and say not now.
Right.
I'm
so
going to give you this here, Matthew. You can drive real quick.
Noodle Tools has recently gone through a facelift and an update as of July 2021. So if people used Noodle Tools previously, you might be unfamiliar with the screen you're seeing now. All of the same features and options are present, but the layout has changed a little bit. And one of the initial changes here is that projects are now categorized by school year.
Oh, interesting.
So if you had previous projects, which I have, I could just go to a previous school year.
Okay, that's
see
cool
those other
because when
projects.
you opened this up, I gotta tell you, I was like, this doesn't look familiar at all. But it's good to know that it went through an update. Okay.
So the first step to beginning any new project in Noodle Tools is to use that soft button titled New Project, and that will sort of open up the wizard that walks you through the next steps. So you would give that project a title. You would select your citation style.
Right, you're in English class, it's MLA. You're in a psychology class, it's APA. You're in a history class. With me, unfortunately, it's Chicago.
Right, and some instructors will specify the style guide that their assignment needs to conform to. Others will allow a student to use the style guide that goes along with their major. These are the three that are primarily used at Pikes Peak Community College.
Great.
So I'll pick Chicago because we've got two people here who are familiar with that style guide, and then we like to leave it defaulted to the advanced level of citations because these are college level projects. So I'll have those selections made and click on select, and now we have created a new project here under the current school year.
Okay. Oops. You gotta watch out for those, Max. They're squirrely.
Yes, they are. So now we are in the undergrad project. And instead of a new project soft button, we have a new source soft button.
Awesome.
So now every source I find for this project, if I want to make sure I remember all the citation information for it, I can create a listing here. It's going to, again, use a wizard to walk us through selecting the appropriate prompts. And so if we are choosing an article out of a database, we would select database journal.
Okay, good.
And now, because it knows we're using the Chicago style, it's prompting us with those fields that are essential for a Chicago citation.
Okay, great. So you just plug in the information, and then it spits out, the actual formatted, right, citation, either bibliographic citation, right? Not necessarily footnotes, or does it do both?
It does both.
Oh, it does both, and that's great. Okay.
It does both. So the thing to keep in mind here is that you're manually cutting and pasting or typing the information into these fields. It's often handy to have a split screen or two windows open at the same time with your article on one side and this screen on the other, so you can just directly copy paste or transcribe. But because you are manually entering the information here, if you make a mistake, that mistake carries over into the final project.
Into the final project. Okay. And then once basically you create this and create an annotation, right? Maybe some especially at the freshman level, right? What's the qualifications of the author, right? What's the central idea or the thesis, right, of the book? And in my class, I'll say, how does this relate to your research question? Other annotations are really, what are the main ideas that the author discussed in the article? But once I create all this, then I can actually create note cards of my reading underneath it, correct?
You can. And you can apply tags to those note cards, tying them to particular topic areas of your research or linking back to individual sources from your source list. So you can use this software to manage your notes as well as your sources.
You know what I love about this, folks, is I gotta say that if he goes back for me real quick to that
Sure.
to that note card, if you have a direct quote, right, that you want to put in parentheses, you have a spot to put your direct quote, right? But say maybe, right, because I always like to say for my history class, but of course, always check with your instructors. I like to see students quote primary sources because that's the data, that is the evidence, right, in the courtroom. But with secondary sources, I don't always like to see them quoted. I like to see them paraphrased. So you could even start out by saying, oh, this is a really great idea that this author has given me. I'm going to go ahead and start out by putting it into the direct quote. But now I want to think about how I want to paraphrase that in my own words or write a summary about the idea so I can start thinking about how it connects with other ideas, and that will help me evaluate, right, maybe the evidence for my research question and help me to articulate an argument or a thesis statement, right? And it even says right here on the bottom, my ideas, original thinking here. So it really does walk you through, and it's going to help you with that scholarly mindset, right? Because some people don't want to use a pen and paper, and I get it. I'm one of those. I'm in between both worlds. I like technology and I use technology, but sometimes I just like being able to, write down my notes. So whatever preference you have, there's a lot of tools here at Pikes Peak Community College to really help you persist through those assignments and really turn in your best work. And trust me, all the faculty here, right? We are rooting for you, and we want you to turn in your best work. Matthew, do you have anything to add?
Well, about the scholarly mindset, one of the ways we talk about it in the library is to view scholarship as an ongoing conversation. And you can almost imagine that conversation happening at a dinner party where you're going to be a guest. You're walking into an environment where the topic has already been under discussion before you arrived. There are experts in the field who are part of that conversation. There are journalists who are sort of distilling the finding of experts and putting them into layman terms. There are amateur enthusiasts. There are all kinds of people involved in this conversation. And the first steps for you to participate are to sort of understand the lay of the land.
Yeah, understand the nature of the conversation.
To develop an understanding of the vocabulary that the people are using who are having that conversation.
Right.
So the scholarly mindset is a mindset of preparing yourself to be a responsible participant in the conversation. And that doesn't mean you start talking the moment you walk through the door. You first need to understand what some of the basic facts that the people having the conversation have already agreed upon. You need to understand where there are areas of conflict and disagreement, where research has already been done to lead people to the point that they're at in the conversation when you join it, and you need to realize that the conversation is going to continue after you leave.
You need to become a part of this conversation. And one of the things that we're going to do through the series of these videos is for instance, if I'm coming into this room to this conversation that Matthew's talking about, and they're talking about we were living in a pandemic. I hope you don't mind me saying this, but we're both vaccinated, so we're comfortable right now being together to do these set of videos. But let's say I'm walking into the room, and there's a virologist, a scientist who specifically studies, viruses, and they're having a high-level conversation about the Spanish influenza, right, or COVID-19. I might not have the foundation of knowledge to really kind of keep pace with that conversation. I'll pick up some things here and there, but I might have to go, wow, I need to look some things up, right? So that I can be better informed to be a part of that conversation. And so through these next series of videos, that's really what we're going to do. We're going to kind of have a small dinner party conversation, and we're going to move through, right? Some steps to think about, like if you had a topic, how would you engage in researching that topic?
Right. And you need to consider that you might be looking at sources in the initial stages of your research that aren't going to make it onto your works cited page.
Oh, yes.
They're just there to give you the background understanding. So those are works that are referenced, but
Right.
they're not necessarily works that are cited.
And
And so it's important to not dismiss a source because you see, this is a tertiary source. This is an encyclopedia article, and my instructor says I can only use scholarly articles.
Primary and secondary sources.
But I wouldn't
right?
dismiss it for that reason.
No,
you might
no.
be able to read that article and develop a new list of vocabulary words that you can use when you're searching for those more appropriate scholarly articles. But it's giving you the background information so that you can, it's almost the stage of the dinner party where you're just kind of standing by the wall listening.
And getting the lay of the land.
Yeah, and
right?
hearing the vocabulary that people are using. And if you need to pull out your phone and look up a word to see what that unfamiliar vocabulary term means, you're getting a foundational understanding of the topic so that when you participate in the conversation, you're not lost.
Context and common knowledge. And so before we transition to our next series of videos, and we hope you enjoyed this conversation between Matthew and myself, I just want to let you know that when we think about tertiary sources, these are subject encyclopedias, references, atlases, right? They're common knowledge sources. No one's going to really agree or disagree. They are, the facts as we know them, okay? And secondary sources oftentimes are scholars who are studying engrossed into a topic, of a specialized topic, right? Where, they have researched, they've either done experimentation or they've read primary sources, and they've been closely working with that material. And then based on the data points, right, the evidence that they find, right, they create arguments and perspectives and interpret that evidence that's a part of the scholarly discourse. And that's why in the dinner party you can walk up and perhaps see a couple of people, they're talking about a basic set of facts, common knowledge, right, and then they inherently disagree because maybe they're looking at the evidence differently, right?
Right, and that's the opinion and analysis level that is what distinguishes a secondary source from a tertiary source.
There you go. And then the primary sources, we'll talk a little bit about that. In the sciences, again, that's experimentation, looking at data of other experiments that have been conducted. In my discipline, like history or other disciplines, primary sources are oftentimes firsthand accounts, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. And at this point, before we transition, I just want to plug that the library or the Learning Commons, right, has a great website to help distinguish between primary, secondary, and tertiary. And if you ever have a question, right, ask your faculty, ask a reference librarian, because they're your friends. And we're here to help you get through your courses and be successful. And the last thing that Matthew is going to show us is a document specifically about understanding, right?
Oh, well, this is where the document is
housed. Okay.
Yes.
All right. And so you can go there and you can read that. Okay, folks, thanks so much for joining us today. And we hope that you will take part in another conversation that we're going to have, which is in regards to the research process, right? How do you find a topic? And then once you find that topic, how do you navigate, the databases? And the conversation that we're going to have in our next video is just more talking about process. Matthew Valdez and the reference librarians have done a beautiful job of creating videos about how to use those databases, and we'll make sure we point you in that right direction. So thanks for joining us.
Yep. Thank you. We have enough information in the library that you could be writing a series of books on a topic. And so this next video, we're going to be
We're going to
looking at how you narrow it down to a scope that's appropriate for the assignment you've been given.
All right. Thanks, folks.